Hello, I'm Daniela, and welcome to Prompt 5 in Stitch With Me in 2023. All previous prompts will be linked below in the show notes. Today's prompt is window, and I find it to be a very intriguing prompt. I had a lot of fun with this one. I can't wait to show you what I did. But think of window as a way to really focus on something. Essentially, a window frames something. It makes the point of view only what you can see through the window. And you have the option of seeing in the window or out the window. So this is a really fun prompt. There's lots you can do, and I really can't wait to see what you come up with. So let me show you my process for this prompt. Since the fifth prompt for May is window, I had a lot of ideas and I gave it a lot of thought, and I decided I wanted to do an underwater window. So I'm going to do a porthole, like from a submarine, and take it with a grain of salt. This is going to be a little bit vintage and a little bit, well, a lot whimsical. So I found a couple of fabrics that I thought I might be able to use here. I have this little sharky one with all those sharks, and then this beautiful panel, like an undersea coral reef. It's just gorgeous. The challenge is, though, my tag is so small, I need my window to have enough of a view to really see it, but not one that it's distracting or really hard to make out that it's a window. So I think I can accomplish that. I have my panels, not really sure which one I'm going to use just yet. And then I have my interior wall. So if you're coming at it from the perspective being inside the submarine to look out the porthole, I need that wall to show. And I'm not sure if I'm going to go with this beige or this silver, silvery gray. Hang on to that idea for a moment. I do want my porthole to be made of felt, and so that limited my choices. I don't have a lot of felt, but I have this beautiful gold felt, and I thought it kind of looked brassy. And then I just found embroidery floss. I don't know what number this is, but I just went through my stash and looked for something close enough to match the porthole. So now I really need to decide how big I want to make that porthole. I have my little trusty template here so that I can make my window. And if I make it too big, it's not really going to be evident that it's a porthole. So I think I'm going to go, the exterior of it will be this 2-inch circle. So that's what I'll trace on my little felt here. And then I need the inside of that. I need the rim of this porthole to be big enough to be recognizable and easy enough to work with. So I don't want it to be too shallow. That's too short. That's still a little too short. Maybe I'll go one up here. I think it would be easier to work with if it's a little thicker. So I'll trace that circle. And this is the circle that I'm going to cut out. So we won't see this. So I'll just put an X through there so I remember to make sure I make that cut properly. I can even put a little hinge on the side, but I don't think that's necessary for this project. So I have my porthole here. So now it's time to make some decisions. I know that my porthole was 2 inches at the largest point. So that's the size I'm going to need for my little scenery that I'm going to see. So now with my 2-inch window, I can always just take a shark here. Oof. All right, so there are a lot of choices there. That's a pretty good one. I'll just trace around that so I have my options here. Well, that's a good one too. Oof. Decisions. I think I'll stick with this guy here. He looks just a little fierce. So I'll trace around him, probably cut him out so that I can make the exact decision when the time is right. And now for this one, since I can never make up my mind, I need my 2-inch circle. I have this fish, but he kind of gets lost. I can do the turtle. Seahorse is kind of nice, and it's got the other fish behind it. Ooh, but I like this fish. And it has the little coral here. So I think that's what I'm going to do here. Do my 2-inch circle. And now I'll cut those out. Since I'm still undecided, I'm just going to set these aside for now to work on that background. So I have my porthole, just set that aside. And just decide which one I really think, well, the gray is a beautiful contrast. Yeah, I'll stick with the gray. So now I'm just going to take this gray and cut out a piece big enough for my card. I can just eyeball this. It doesn't have to be perfect. I can always trim it down later. So I have my background piece, and now I'll cut out my porthole, the inside as well as the outside. So now I have the porthole here, and I can start to really narrow down which one of these little windows I want. I think I'm going to go with this blue one. The shark is great, but I think I'm going to go with this blue one. So now I'm going to cut out this fabric just around that 2-inch mark. Because this is going over it, I have a little leeway. I can trim it down further just so that no fabric sticks out. But there, my porthole is starting to come to life. I can just set it up exactly where I want it and begin to stitch it down. I'm going to just trim it a little bit more just so I don't have any of this fabric sticking out. So now I can just figure out exactly where I want it. I'm not getting a lot of that coral, but I could always stitch something in if I wanted. So that's kind of looking the way I want it to look. I separated my embroidery floss, and so I have just one strand of embroidery floss here. I'm going to pin this down just to my fabric and just stitch around the perimeter on the outside. I want this to really hold it in place and not distract from the rest of the elements. So I'll pin it in place. And just do a little straight stitch all the way around. Make a little tiny stitch so it doesn't really show, but if it does show, it'll be a nice shape. So I stitched around the outside of the porthole, and then I decided it really needed the stitching on the inside. I want to add some stitches so they look like bolts on the porthole, but before that I want to add just a little bit of that coral, the one that got hidden by the actual felt porthole. So I threaded my needle with 2 strands of this orange embroidery floss. It's a beautiful color, similar to the color in the fish. And now I just want to make some little shapes that are indicative of that coral. So I'll just have little shapes coming up, maybe 2 little spots here. And I'll just take my thread and just stitch just little stitches to make it look like coral. And it's the contrast between that thread, that nice beautiful orange thread, and that blue background that really make it come to life. Just do some back stitches here. So that's closer to the little scene that I was looking for. So now I'm ready to start making my little bolts out of French knots. What I want to do is put those bolts evenly spaced around the piece. So I'll just make little dots, and I'll start at the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and then I'll just space them in between as well. And now I'll stitch my French knots. I have all 6 strands of embroidery floss in that color that matches the felt here. So I'll just pull up my thread. There's a knot on the end. I'll just come up through that bolt area, wrap my thread around 2 or 3 times. I think I'll go 3. And then I'll bring my needle back next to that area, not that same hole. Keeping the tension here, you can see it pulled it taut, but not too tight around my needle. And now I'll just draw that thread through, holding it to the very end, and then letting it form that little knot. And it gives just a little bit of dimension. I'll continue going all the way around to all those areas I made the dots to make my little bolts on this porthole. I'll make sure all of my threads still has 3 winds around the needle, and just add that little extra bit of dimension. And then I'll see what I'm ready to do, if I'm ready to attach my piece or I want to add a few more stitches. So I've completed all my French knots, and I'm liking the way this looks, but it still looks a little sparse to me. I want it to look like the inside of a submarine. So in order to do that, I'm going to take another piece of this fabric that matches the background, and I'll put it down, and it has a little bit of a rough edge, and I kind of like that. And now I'm going to stitch that down with that gray thread, the same little stitch that I did on one side and then the other, and then I'll make some French knots to look like bolts that was holding the stainless steel wall of this submarine in place. I just think that's a cute touch, and it breaks up the plainness of this piece. So I have one strand of gray thread that matches this color fairly well. Pin this in place. And I'll do those little stitches the same way that I did around the porthole. And I think instead of cutting the edge, I'm just going to tuck it under. It gives a little more weight to the piece. So I've stitched my little panel down. Now I just want to make some French knots to echo it. They're going to be a little bit smaller. I'll just pen in the little places I want to put the French knots. Put them on the top third. So I'll put on either side, and then the center, maybe 2 here in between. Move that one over just a little. And now I'll go about making my French knots using 4 strands here. And these are going to be smaller French knots. So I'll just come in here, and it's the same procedure. I have my needle threaded. I'm just going to wrap my needle twice, and then go down right next to where I came in. Pull the needle, and I have a little knot. I'll move to the next one and do the same thing until I have all my little bolts put in place. So now I have all my bolts, and I really like the way that came out. It does remind me of something that I would imagine happens in a submarine. So I have my card here, and now I'm ready just to attach it. I still have my thread attached to my last French knot, so I'll just from there add little stitches and hold it in place. I'll go through the card and begin to tack it down. Now I'll just tack it down in a few spots all the way around and show you how it looks and show you the remaining cards. So here's May's card all complete from the prompt window. I love how that turned out. I have my previous ones here from January, February, March, and April. And now we're 5 months in through Stitch With Me in 2023. I'm thrilled with the way this is coming out. So that's prompt 5 in Stitch With Me in 2023. I want to thank everyone who's participated, from those on the Facebook page to those who comment down below. It's been a really fun workshop. I can't believe we're almost halfway through the year. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.